Josef Szojas i kłamtokę, dziki szpotkę, partilokę, sektujanten babaden, Pölkosowiak spirtinten, sektujanten babaden, Pölkosowiak spirtinten.
Welcome, God is Open. I am your host, Christopher Fisher. Today on God is Open, we are going to be giving a book update. A lot of people are asking about the status of the book I've been working on. I've been putting a lot of time and effort into the book. I've had several people that have been helping me edit and revise and correct typos and provide commentary. Matt Chisholm of Bible Brodown has been extremely helpful, and Rachel Troyer as well. But it is coming along quite nicely. It should be done within the next month or so. The first volume is going to cover ancient history all the way up to the biblical era. And so you can see here in my table of contents where I do have highlights for unfinished chapters that I need to work on a little bit more. But it's come a long ways, and there's quite a lot of words. I'm up to 76,000 words, and most of it is quotes and pulling together different sources. So it's not just narrative. It takes a lot of work to put all this stuff together. And so taking a look at the outline real quick, you see where it's come. Origins of the Hebrew religion is done. Origins of the Greek religion is done. The collision of worldviews, talking about the pagan perspective of Jewish theology, that is complete. I do have to finish up with the Jewish side. There's a lot more Jewish text talking about Jewish theology than there is non-Jewish text talking about Jewish theology. I got to finish up sections on the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is a lot of literature, so I might just be sampling the most predestination type, fatalism orientated texts to try to show some perspective, some variance in perspective. I got the letter to Aristeas that I do need to finish up. Enoch is almost done, and that's a huge undertaking in itself. One to Maccabees. I've got the Apocrypha section almost all complete. I need to work on the Wisdom of Solomon, the letter of Jeremiah. Ben Sira is done. That was a huge undertaking as well. But when we get into late Second Temple theology, we're talking about the Hebrew Bible and the Greek Bible. I do have those chapters complete. I think Josephus is about done, and I have to do a lot with Philo of Alexandria. But that's where we're going to conclude. I'm going to build a conclusion that talks about how the perception of God has changed within that time. And the second volume is going to pick up where we leave off and start talking about where we're at during this period. What are the influences? Where are those influences? And where the church fathers come into contact with these various ideas and those different streams of thought. But it is almost complete. I would say another month or two before I could get some sort of final copy out that can be complete. But we'll have to probably start covering some of these chapters on the show just so that we got audio format explaining what some of these things are. Now, the idea of this book is to be the most complete resource possible for the development of the idea of God in the Jewish world, Judeo-Christian, and trace the Platonistic origins, how it infiltrated the church, in what ways it infiltrated the church, what stages there were in this development, and the final form that we see in someone like Augustine. Or even Clement or Philo have some pretty late stage conceptions of God. And so what this work will do, it will show progressively which ideas came in around which time periods and how they affected the overall environment. And of course, Alexandria is going to be isolated case which developed isolated from main Judea, because it's a Greek Hellenized place where there's a lot of all the Gnostics come from this area. And so you're going to see Alexandria as a Gnostic hotbed spawning all these various beliefs, of which Augustinianism Origenism, and Clement of Alexandria are part of this worldview, a Christian Gnosticism. So to give you a little sample of the text of what this is going to entail, we'll look at the conclusion of the book of Daniel, which is gone through chapter by chapter, talking about the various chapters and their description of God and their ideas, especially the fatalism or the predestination type concepts that are found in the book of Daniel. And here's the conclusion to that chapter. There is an element of fatalism within the text. History has a trajectory, a, quote, deep structure, unquote. Within Daniel, God somehow has access to this trajectory. Although it is not explicit, it can be assumed God's guiding hand is pushing history to these ends. The Hebrew idea, seen already in Jubilees, is that God is intimately connected to the world events. Paul, century later, writes, "And he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on the face of the earth, and has determined their preappointed times and boundaries of their dwellings, so that they should seek the Lord in hope that they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us." God is the guiding pulse. He determines movements of nations. In this sense, fatalism can function, but the fatalism is mixed with free will. Even within Paul, God is using these movements in an attempt to reach people. God is hopeful that his acts can inspire genuine relationship. Often this fails. Recall Daniel 4, where the length of the king's reign was dependent on his righteousness. Departing from texts like Hosea, Daniel 11 through 12 are more preoccupied with assuring righteous individuals of the coming justice than converting wayward Israel. The audience was assumed to be God's righteous followers, who needed hope rather than conversion. Prior chapters, such as the prayer in chapter 9, have subtle warnings to the people to be counted among the righteous. These indicate an element of free will. God responds in anger to unrighteousness, Daniel 9:16. Daniel appeals to God's own character to change God's mind, Daniel 9:19. Daniel is not a fatalist in the modern sense. The notion of determinism described in both Jubilee and Josephus' work was similar. Although things could be fated, individuals still had freedom to act within the bounds of those fated events. The fatalism was not a type that bound individuals to evil or good. Fated events were those events that propelled history forward. Throughout Daniel, God remains sovereign. He is the king that sits on the throne and rules world events. The human kings are pawns and playthings. The stories concern themselves with God's direct intervention in history. God saves his righteous worshippers from human schemes, chapter 3 and 6. God causes a king to go insane in order to humble him, chapter 4. God punishes rebellious kingdoms, chapter 5. God is a major player in world events, chapter 7 through 12. A divine war rages in the heavenly realms, chapter 9. But God will be victorious. He will lead his people into a new age, to everlasting life. God is open and relational, subject to change, and ready to hear petitions. His kingship, though, is in prime spotlight. So that's kind of what you can expect to see. A lot of quotes from scholars, a lot of quotes from primary works, a lot of additional information about text and the text origins, and I'm trying to cover it as much as possible, all Jewish texts that I can find. It might not be feasible, but I'm trying to do what I can with the time that I have. Anyways, questions, comments, put that down below, or start a thread on the God is Open Facebook page. Thank you for listening.